Content warning for discussions of sexual assault. Someplace underneath. Ryan, it is such a pleasure to have you here today. I know that we've been trying to schedule this for a while, and I'm really, really grateful for your time. You're a busy man.
This is a really important story, really important subject, and I know you're pretty well versed and been following all the drama. So I'm excited to talk to you guys too.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you could almost say I'm fixated on it, unhealthily. But yes, you've been sharing this story. Again, like you just said, it is so incredibly important. It's because I think it's one of the most important parts of the season because it's happening in real time. I would love to just briefly, I know that you cover this a lot already on the show you do with Cara Burrell, but would you mind just giving us a brief just history of like how you know Tim Ballard?
Sure. Yeah, no problem. So back in about 2010, I met Tim at a research conference. I was going into fringe, Mormon, LDS, doctrinal theories. And this guy came onto the stage who was completely unknown, who was authoring a book at the time called The American Covenant, named Tim Ballard, and he gave a presentation on some of his apocalyptic views of the scriptures and tried to tie Mormon theology, which states that America is a special land, a covenant land, a land that God has set aside for the most righteous people in the world, kind of similar to how the Jews view Zion or Israel to them. He argued that America is to Americans what the land of Israel is to Jews, a Zion that's going to usher in second coming of Jesus Christ, or in their case, the Messiah, or in the Jewish case, their version of Savior. Anyways, he has this theory that America is going to play this pivotal role in these apocalyptic events. Presented his ideas, argued that the founding fathers, including Abraham Lincoln, all became converted to this idea, and that he's discovered it through his interpretation of scriptures. He gave that presentation to a small audience in Orem, Utah, at that time at one of these fringe research conferences that I happened to be attending. And at the time where I was with my religious beliefs, I thought it was amazing. I thought this was kind of tying everything together that I loved, which was my religion, the Mormon faith, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon scriptures, the stories of Joseph Smith being this last days savior figure, prophet figure, as well as American history and our founding fathers and all the things that they inspired me and others to try and emulate. So he tied all this stuff together in a narrative that I really took to. So I approached him afterwards, and I was just starting a TV show at that time called Nephite Explorer, the Nephite Explorer Project, which dove into fringe, kind of extremist Mormon beliefs. And I told him, hey, I'd love to feature you and your research on my show. What do you say? And he was all over it. He was just publishing a book with his ideas. And so that first season of my TV show featured him, and maybe like 4 or 5 episodes had parts of his research in it. And we began traveling around the world, or the United States at least, exploring these ideas, taking trips back east, doing research together, interviewing pastors from New England and historians in Washington, D.C. And he was putting that research into his book series. I was putting it into my TV show. We became friends. We became partners in this endeavor. And we really felt like we were on a mission to save the nation, to save the world, to advance these Christian ideas that were going to stave off apocalyptic doomsday destructions of the last days preceding the coming of Jesus Christ.
Sure.
And so it was like a religious endeavor that I was passionate about, he was passionate about, and that continued for about 7 years. We ran together tours to these historical sites on the East Coast where we believe that miracles happened to usher in this narrative, and took busloads of people there that had like-minded beliefs.
Is that the same tour where he had the video kind of meltdown?
Yeah, fast forwarding, he ended up kicking me out of that whole endeavor, continued the tour on his own, and found out actually our first stop, that video you're referring to, is when he just found out that the Mormon Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, had just publicly disowned him. In the press, issued a very rare public denouncement, and he found out, and I found it kind of ironic that he was at the first stop in Plymouth, Massachusetts, at a site that we went to together many occasions, ranting and raving how this was all a lie. Nothing you hear in the press is true. And so, yeah, that was right. That was on that tour. He continued to do that. He, in fact, brought Elder Ballard, a leading member of the Mormon Church, on that tour. And he continued to do that every year, even after we had our falling out.
Yeah, because that was, so you were saying you guys met in 2011 and you were working with him for the years following that. And that, I'm calling it a crash out on camera. That was in 2023. So I believe it was 2023. So that was way past your time with him. But yeah, I thought I had heard that somewhere, that was the same tour. It's very interesting. That had to have been kind of.
Was it scary? Were you just like, oh gosh, like, please don't hit me?
Well, he wasn't there at that point, at least physically.
I wasn't there, but yeah, when his world started imploding and everybody around him started disowning him and making massive allegations, I was in shock. I knew what he was about and what he had, the dark paths that he had gone down at that time, and I had a whole list of friends that had been character assassinated and told me some of the really dark things that he was up to. But to have it actually come out in the press and people start exposing him publicly, that was a shock, because he is a dangerous person and very vindictive, very quick to anger, and anybody that opposes him had better be watching out, because he's gone to some great lengths to try and ruin people's lives. Unfortunately, people that I know and care about, and we can talk about that a little bit later when we get into the allegations, probably.
Yeah. And well, it's really why what you're doing is so important. And I think we're all very grateful that you're speaking out, because he obviously very openly is vindictive and wants to cause problems for people who are challenging him, even though he deserves to be challenged. So, we're really, really grateful for you speaking out, especially as a guy. I don't know how else to say that. It's important to have like a guy speaking, because sometimes bros want to listen to other bros, and that's fine. So your voice is super important to the victims of this. And it seems like there's more and more victims. I'm learning at least about more and more of the victims that keep coming up. When did you guys cut ties? Like, what year was that?
About 2017, we cut ties. So
that was after he had sort of had OUR going.
Yeah, I met him while he was still working for the Department of Homeland Security. And there's some debate on whether he was just an unpaid intern or actually had a paycheck job, anyways. And then I was around for the start of OUR. I became part of that at the beginning. I left quickly. I didn't stay continuing with OUR for very long, but a lot of my friends and associates did. And so I kind of had a front row seat to all of that all the way through 2017 before we cut ties. And that's actually really when he really started going off the rails, if you go down the timeline of events.
when you were cutting ties, was it because of conflict or just you were moving on? Were you having issues with him personally?
Yeah. His ego over the course of 7 years was growing to astronomical proportions, which made it tough to be business partners with them. It made it tough to continue to advance his message. I also, longer I became aware of how he operated, the more it took a long time for me to see the cult that he was building. And I'm going to refer back to that word because it's taken me a long time to actually arrive to that word. That he's a cult personality that built a cult following and used very cult-like manipulative and damaging tactics to get people to stay in the cult. And so that evolved over a number of years. And some of the things that I saw was one, well, for example, right when OUR was about to be founded, we held a training for jump team operatives that were going to go on these missions to rescue kids in foreign countries, as we supposed at the time. And one of these trainings involved a lot of weapons. And so we were shooting at a gun range with AR-15s and sidearms. And one of the people in the upper management of OUR who wanted to participate in the training, and he came and was on the firing line and had an accidental discharge where he grabbed his sidearm, pulled the trigger, the bullet went through his leg, very serious gun wound injury. We got him packaged up. We had a combat medic on site. This was the very first training for the OUR jump team, by the way. It did not go well. It went off the rails right away. So while one of our team members was packaging him up, Tim pulled me and two instructors aside and said, "Hey, the sheriff is going to be here. They're going to ask questions how this happened. Does anybody know about the holster?" And I'm like, "What holster?" He's like, "Well, we gave him the wrong holster for that gun." And why that's significant is holsters are designed to be form-fitting to the firearm in a very specific way where when you go down to grab it, your finger can't go in the trigger well and you don't actually pull the trigger and shoot yourself in the leg. That's the specific design of that. And what had happened is he gave an incorrect holster to for that firearm and gave it to this untrained, unskilled trainee. And so that played a major role in contributing to his accident. Now, the accidents happened, but this was a result of severe negligence. Yeah. And while this guy is bleeding out on the ground, Tim is trying to do damage control and trying to get us to lie to law enforcement if needs be. He told us specifically, well, make sure nobody knows about that holster, separate the gun from the holster, put them in separate bags, and let's make sure that doesn't come out when law enforcement gets here. So from that moment on, I knew that this guy's moral compass was not the righteous crusader that he claimed to be, that he was building, but he was building a narrative and a character that he would sell to the world, to the nation, that would get him all the way into Hollywood movies. But the real person was somebody totally different.
For obvious reasons, we hear a lot of headlines about the sexual assault, impropriety, those sort of things, which is horrific. But there's so many different levels going on with him, and stuff like, negligence is this whole side level where we're like, we want to focus on these sexual assault victims, but also there's these other kind of victims. And I would like to talk to you before we leave about the financial aspect of it. But whenever I hear you talk about your time with him, I come from a stunt background. I'm a stunt person. And so a lot of the way I feel like I'm watching his motivation, it feels like he's trying to, especially, we have Sound of Freedom to show for that, but it seems like he wants to just be in the movies more than other things. And I'm kind of curious if you have a sense of whether he really had pure intentions at first, or was his moral compass kind of always askew? Or do you have a sense of that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's a question that I've been wrestling with and trying to figure out and piece together and look back to my memories and my time with him. Was this guy really on a righteous crusade, or was he on some huge, grand, ambitious delusion of grandeur tour to try and elevate himself? And the sad reality is it's more and more towards the latter.
Oh, do you think him believing that he's one of the chosen ones that might have fed into it?
Yeah. I think it probably started with his obsession for founding fathers and presidents, past presidents of the United States, that all had some heroic story that became loved and endeared by the American people and accomplished amazing things, such as Lincoln. He understood that you needed a story to be able to become an American hero. And so I believe he sought out from the beginning to create that story. Create a narrative about himself, basically take something that was completely fictional and try and live and do and conduct events in a way to make a fictional version of himself that's an American hero, that's a righteous crusader, into an actual nonfiction story. And try to emulate some of the stories from American history and American presidents. And one of the ones that he was super enamored with was Abraham Lincoln, who became an American hero because he freed the slaves. He was a crusader for freedom, right? And rightfully so, he should be. So Tim used, I believe, the cause of trafficked children, conflated it with modern day slavery, talked about it like it was even worse than slavery of the earlier years in American history, and then positioned himself to be an Abraham Lincoln type figure to combat that slavery, accomplish some amazing feats, become an American hero, and achieve all of his ambitions of being famous and powerful and have money and influence and acclaim on those regards. And you said it, you asked if it seems like he was more interested in being in movies than actually the cause. And that's the truth. And that's what I saw from the beginning, because my background is film, documentary film. And so I not only put him in my TV show, but he had a whole slew of ideas on media projects that would create this persona and this narrative of this righteous crusader, this American hero. And he tasked me with making that a reality, making him presented in a way that he would become that American hero. You know, in the same way that Marvel characters are, you know, like, yeah. So yeah, that I saw that from the very beginning. Now, I was under the impression that we would be actually saving kids in this endeavor, that we would be turning people's hearts to God through all of this. But as time went on, those things were not part of his actual objectives. They were just the means to create this fictional character about himself that he could present to the world in a way that would make him endearing and loved, an American hero, like we see in the Sound of Freedom movie. And one more side note to this whole story, because this is really important to get out. I'm so glad you asked about it. Last summer, I went down to Colombia. After issuing my story, I was contacted by some of the lawyers that were representing the women victims of Tim Ballard and the sexual assault allegations. And they asked if I would be willing to issue an affidavit for my perspective that he's a self-aggrandizing, ambitious movie star, not a righteous crusader trying to actually help children. If I'd put that in writing in an affidavit, and because it would help one of Tim Ballard's victims. And so I did. And then I went down and testified to this fact in a court case against Kelly Suarez in Colombia. And we could get into the whole, we could talk for hours about the Kelly Suarez case, but the short version of it is that she was a 19-year-old girl that was entrapped by Tim, who came to Cartagena and turned her and her associates into pedophiles or child traffickers. She had no history of that, none doing that, but he goes around to these foreign countries, waves money in front of desperate people in desperate situations asking to buy kids. And the sad reality is some people in desperate situations make bad choices, and they participate in his ruse, his charade, and he asks them to bring kids to his party. Kelly got caught up in that. And even though she never trafficked kids, she never brought kids to the party. Mm-hmm. She was not involved in any sort of trafficking and was exonerated from trafficking. She did get convicted for pimping, which is accepting money for somebody else doing sex work, even if it is consensual.
Yeah.
And so that was happening. That trial was going down in Colombia. I was asked if I would testify. So I went down there and testified to what I knew that I think sheds a huge light on the importance of his motivations. And my testimony then, it is today, that he's more concerned with being perceived as a hero and making a movie or a documentary pretending to be nonfiction about himself being a hero than he is about saving kids. It's not about actually saving kids. And I know his fans would be absolutely shocked to hear that. I was like, no, Tim wants to save kids. He's putting his life on the line to save kids. He's just using that as a vehicle to elevate his own self, his own ambitions, his own delusions of grandeur. And unfortunately, people like Kelly Suarez and others get caught in that charade, in that movie that he's making, and they go to jail, and there's real consequences for that.
Isn't she facing like 20 years in prison?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's so abhorrent. And like you were just saying, he's actually in many cases creating human trafficking when he goes into these scenarios, because at best he seems very ill-equipped to handle those situations. But that makes sense. What you're saying is that the saving kids is sort of a secondary or even like non-essential part of the storyline. But in reality, what he's doing is like hurting the most impoverished. He's hurting these people, and he's using this tactic of manipulation in which if you question him, well, then you're a pedophile. You obviously don't want to save kids. And some people, I think, have a really hard time differentiating that. Especially, I wanted to ask you, so he has this very deeply entrenched idea of like American patriotism and like being an American hero, but he also has, it seems like his sights are set also on, or what they were on, the church. I guess, is he officially excommunicated, or do they just like tell him he was bad?
Yeah, they publicly disowned him. Said he used the name of one of the senior member of the Apostle, Tim Ballard.
Yeah,
his name inappropriately, but I've gotten from my sources confirmation that he was actually excommunicated.
Okay.
Now that can be reversed, and it's been over a year, so it's possible that could be reversed under a process of repentance. I don't know what that would look like. That'd be up to his stake president and his ecclesiastical leaders. But he was excommunicated, according to my sources, by all definitions. Was no longer listed in the family registry for his local congregation, and publicly disowned. So, yes. So
before that happened, there is a lot of discussion that there was some words said about him being both the president of the United States and the future prophet of the LDS Church. And the idea of the mythology around him, it really resonates with me as compared to somebody like Tom Harrison or Ken Krogh or even Chad Daybell, watching people in this like little weird fringe world creating these like second lives, or like these personas over themselves, these otherworldly things. And that's partly probably because they've all been sort of connected in certain ways. And do you know if Tim is still in contact with Tom Harrison and Ken Krogh? Are they all sort of interacting with each other still?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Do your viewers need a quick rundown on who Tom Harrison is? Because this is really important.
We've covered him pretty extensively.
Pretty good? Okay. Yeah. All right. So, even recently, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, Tim went on a podcast and try and denounce like everything I was saying, and called me a pedophile, of course, that I'm working for the traffickers. I'm trying to protect actual pedophiles by, testifying in Kelly Suarez's defense. And in that podcast, he refuted my claim that he believes Tom Harrison to be a prophet. And he told me that personally, very early on, really at the very beginning of OUR, that the person in Visions of Glory, Spencer, he reached out to Tim. Yeah, Tom Harrison was the spiritual guru, as you mentioned, for Chad and Lori Daybell, killed Lori's kids, Rudy Frankie and Jody Hildebrandt.
Yeah.
He's been like the spiritual inspiration behind a whole bunch of messed up people. And Tim is one of those. And he has had contact with Tim recently. He said in this podcast that he reveres Tom as, he says, Ryan claims that I think he's a prophet. I never said he was a prophet. He's a man who's a really good friend, who's an advisor and an inspiration to me and has spiritual gifts, but I never said a prophet.
Okay.
So he's still behind the Tom Harrison bandwagon. And that's a scary proposition, because Tom Harrison is a doomsday figure that can apparently motivate people to murder their own kids.
And yet the church is not speaking up about him at all, are they? I know that he had to make the letter a couple years back about saying, like, I didn't mean any of this, but the last I know of is that he still holds like the priesthood. He's still working inside the church and doing some kind of important stuff inside the church. So why do you think that is?
That's a really good question. I wish I knew the answer to that. All I can tell you is this, that Tom Harrison, up until current day, as far as I'm aware, works in the missionary department for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. He helped choose it. He helps place missionaries at different places and evaluates whether they're of sound mind and judgment to actually serve a mission. I've been told that he evaluates prospective missionaries that have mental health challenges and things like that. Which is kind of really scary, because if you know his books and his theology, he's all about dark spirits, evil spirits. If somebody has an evil spirit, it's justifiable to kill them. Really dark things like that. So for him to actually be serving in a position of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints where he's evaluating missionaries is a scary proposition, is nowhere fit to make clinical evaluations of someone's mental health. Now, he working in that department was overseen by Elder M. Russell Ballard, who, as if you know the whole story, who elevated Tim to huge popular status in the church by publishing his books and advocate for him, speaking publicly about him before disowning him. So there is a direct connection between Tom Harrison, Elder Ballard, and Tim. And I believe Elder Ballard introduced Tom Harrison to Tim. Also, Janet Russin, the psychic, was that Tim works with. She was also had connections to Elder Ballard, was Elder Ballard's personal psychic. And that's how he was introduced. So there's this like inner group that we're seeing, just like little bits and pieces of that include Tom Harrison. And what other thing that I can tell you that I don't think I've talked about publicly before is I have a source, let me just put it that way, a very, very good source that knows what's going on in Tom Harrison's life and his history. And Tom Harrison grew up in a congregation and raised his family on a street that had other general authorities of the church living in close proximity. So he was rubbing shoulders with very high up, the highest up members of the Mormon church leadership for the last 40 plus years. And he has, he's even mentioned publicly that, he was personal friends with Elder Maxwell, who was a Quorum of 12 member, and other general authorities. So he has an inside pass to that elite group of men that are running the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And coming with that, I'm sure, are certain immunities or exemptions for fringe beliefs, because he has not been excommunicated. He has somehow made all sorts of crazy claims about being a prophet, about prophesying doomsday events, about Joseph Smith coming back to life and taking over the church, being resurrected and coming back and finishing his work. He's made all sorts of prophecies like that, but has not been excommunicated or denounced publicly, which leads me to believe that the only reason is because either some of the leadership of the church are drinking the Kool-Aid with him, or he has very powerful friends that are protecting him.
You have Tim publicly excommunicated, but it seems like he's still kind of in coordination with some of those people then. Like what does excommunication mean then if he still kind of has those powerful connections to the church? It seems like it doesn't matter if he's excommunicated. Right. I don't know.
Yeah, well, it might not matter at all to him personally for his eternal salvation, because there is a special ritual ordinance that's very secret, the general membership doesn't know about, called the second anointing, where if you go through this special ordinance, it absolves you from responsibility for your sins, and you're guaranteed a spot in the highest heaven. If you, no matter what you do, except if you murder somebody that's innocent, or what was the other? There's like sin against the Holy Ghost, or shed innocent blood. Yeah.
Sorry.
Keyword being innocent. You can still murder somebody, but as long as they're not innocent.
Yeah.
It's almost like a martyr or something. Like the more you come at him, the more he's like, oh, I'm even bigger in my own head now because the devil's trying to reach me. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I believe he's gone through that ordinance. Elder Ballard was fond of giving that ordinance to people. He told me on one experience that he got a special blessing from Elder Ballard that absolved him from guilt and working in the child pedophilia realm. And so even if you're excommunicated, I don't think he loses his eternal glory in the highest degree of heaven. So I don't think that it matters. But one thing that I need you to be aware of is there's the inner workings of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and then there's the public face of it. And those are two very different things. They never, ever publish or discuss publicly any sort of strife or contention or disagreements. They put on a front of absolute complete uniformity and of mind and thought and doctrine, and the most, like, the thing that I believe the church leaders are terrified of is the perception of the reality that they are not prophets, and that they are not receiving inspiration or communication directly from God. And so they are constantly trying to maintain that perception of being led by God, being prophets, and any sort of dissent like causes that to come into question. For example, the previous president of the church, Thomas S. Monson, Gordon B. Hinckley, freely used the word Mormon. And as in reference to Mormon culture and Mormons and Book of Mormon. And then the current president of the church came forward and said, that's a victory for Satan. Jesus wants us to be called members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And just that difference of opinion has caused major ripples in some membership, because they're like, well, if the previous prophets didn't get the message, and the current prophets gets a different message, is God talking to the current prophet and not them? Like, it's this balancing act of trying to maintain the perception that of uniformity, that God is at the head of this church, and that he is inspiring these leaders to do his will.
God said the shoulders are okay now.
Showing the shoulders. That's another change. Every single little change like that, like with garments going from here to here, people fall off because they come to realize on one level or another that these men aren't word for word inspired by God teaching the same thing. I mean, doctrines and policies of the church have changed so much over the last 180 years. I mean, And if you're a student of history, you can see these changes for even like regarding coffee and alcohol and other things. And these changes obviously show that God is either changing his mind all the time or is confused or these guys are just making things up based on their own learning.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe God's confused. Hey, we don't know. He might be confused.
I don't know.
That's a lot. This is going back slightly, but do you have any idea how Janet Rustin became M. Russell Ballard's personal psychic? Well, how did that happen?
I also like a personal psychic, like it's a chef.
Yeah, we need one.
Well, all I know is that there's advertisements out before all this that offering her services as a pet psychic.
Oh,
so I think she was talking to deceased pets and giving their owners reassurance of some sort. So she was a pet psychic, and somehow that morphed into she was able to get into some very influential circles with Elder Ballard. Elder Ballard put her in contact with Tim. I don't know that whole story. If somebody knows the chain of events to go from an obscure, strange pet psychic to now advising one of the prophets and leaders of the Mormon Church, that's a career trajectory that's pretty astounding.
That's really, she probably could have made it out in LA too. I think there's a lot of pet psychics out here.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any sense of how Ken Krogh kind of fell into this soup?
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, I kind of have front row seat to a lot of this. I met Ken even before Tim. He was in my parents' congregation, and at that time he was working on the social media marketing aspect for the church and trying to reach youth and things like that. So he was employed by the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints at that time. He was a marketing guru. He had come out of the business world, lent his talents to the church. Then I don't know if it was, I guess I don't have firsthand knowledge or even secondhand knowledge that he was suggested by Elder Ballard to work with Tim, and Elder Ballard made that contact. But as far as I know, most of the people that came into Tim's life, 2012, 2013, when OER starting, were at the direction of Elder Ballard. There's a guy named Russell Brunson, I believe, who ClickFunnels founder, very wealthy entrepreneur that in Utah, who went on social media the day after the church denounced Tim and said, "That can't be true. Elder Ballard told me personally to meet Tim and donate to his cause and help him get OUR off the ground." That tweet was immediately taken down like 48 hours later, but it's been archived elsewhere if you're look it up. So Russell was told by Elder Ballard to donate money and time and expertise to OUR. Others were told that as well. So even though I don't have a direct connection that Ken Krogh was told to, was instructed to go assist Tim in this endeavor, the fact that he worked for the church and was in that proximity and in that circle leads me to believe that Elder Ballard probably orchestrated that as well.
Ken Krogh. I've spoken with a couple sources that kind of still connect him to Tim currently, maybe a little bit more behind the scenes, but that there is an idea that maybe the three of those gentlemen, Tom, Tim, and Ken, all kind of have the idea of, like, they're basically kind of awaiting the end times together and, like, sort of maybe wanting to create some, like, post-apocalyptic communities. Do you feel like there's any truth to that?
Yeah, absolutely there is. They are gathering in a place called Spring City right now, which is south of Salt Lake City. It's a kind of a excluded mountain valley that has attracted a lot of doomsday preppers because of certain prophecies about that being some sort of safe refuge. Ken has moved down there. He's, I think, actively running for city council right now and has just proposed a master plan community in that area. Ken is tight with Tom Harrison. When Tim got ousted from OUR, he took Ken with him, along with Celeste Boris, who's one of the victims now, accusing Tim of sexual assault. Tim took some of a small group of people with him to start his own Spear Fund foundation after he got kicked out of OUR. Ken was one of those guys. And so Ken's been a loyal supporter for a very long time. And he's actively building a master plan community down in Spring City, along with Rod Meldrum, who is a Heartland Theory, Book of Mormon kind of fringe person that I've worked with. And then there's also rumors that this community is trying to restore Joseph Smith's original vision for the concept of Zion, which includes Joseph Smith's doctrine of polygamy.
Yeah.
I was about to ask, are there women and kids there in the community?
Yeah, there are. And there's very large houses being built. And some speculate that's because they are expecting and trying to usher in a second generation of polygamous doctrine, even though mainstream church has denounced that.
It's haunting because it does strike me so similar to what Chad and Lori were doing. I'm not suggesting that anybody's planning on doing any killing, but what they were planning for was kind of the same thing. We also saw a couple of the other kind of extreme doomsday people, the Thibodeaus, and that kid get kidnapped towards, I think, Alaska to, again, start a community for the end times. And it's just, do you think that this is still kind of their fringe beliefs? And you think that not necessarily I know you can't answer this fully, but like the leaders of the church right now are not also part of that plan, as far as you know? Like they're not trying to turn Spring City as the church into the apocalypse?
Yeah, I don't run in those circles enough to know where they stand. But like we pointed out earlier, Tom Harrison, which embodies all of these doomsday beliefs, is still working for the church internally, and others as well. Ken Krogh hasn't been denounced by the church at all, even though he's doing all sorts of really shady stuff in Spring City down there, claiming that people were involved in child sacrifice rings and things like that. Active lawsuits that are going on right now. And I believe restraining order was just issued or filed against Ken Krogh for some of these extreme religious beliefs being put into practice and affecting real people's lives. As far as the leaders of the church, I don't know. They, if they had a problem with any of this, then I think they'd take the responsibility of denouncing false prophets, but they're not denouncing any false prophet other than Tim. So that by default is an admission of support.
It seems like a lot of Tim Ballard's followers are still LDS people. And so I don't know how that works if they are members of the church and the church denounced him, but they're still like fervently, kind of defending him. Is that causing these like rifts in the church? Yeah,
the narrative that Tim is pushing, and he's been pushing ever since that denouncement, is that Elder Ballard has Tim's full support, and he did all the way till his dying day. And there's this low level infiltration of bad people that have gotten into the PR department of the church, and they issued that statement. Now, I've talked to somebody very high up in the PR department, and he confirmed to me that denouncement came directly from the top, from Elder Ballard, even though Tim's and Catherine, his wife, are on podcasts and social media saying that they've talked to Elder Ballard and he had no idea that happened. But unfortunately, he died a month later, and so can't set the record straight. But Tim is, again, trying to weave a fictional story into reality, and that story, to try and maintain his prestige in the minds of members of the church, is that Elder Ballard has full support. This was just some low-level political hit job by people in the PR department that didn't like his rising star and wanted to cast some shade on that. That's not true.
It helps for, like you said, his sort of martyr story, for sure. He can kind of use it to his benefit almost.
Well, and to your point, even in the origins of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith was faced with all sorts of allegations. He was constantly being dragged to court. He was accused of he was tarred and feathered. Yeah, that's a great story right there, because that is like preached as like a foundation of faith, that he was tarred and feathered, and then he preached the next day a sermon and was able to continue. That proves his faith. But what most people don't know about that story is that he was tarred and feathered by one of the brothers of the house he was living in, because he was pursuing sexually their youngest sister, Miranda. And because of his sexual pursuits, that angered some of the brothers in that family, who organized the mob to tar and feather him. So Joseph Smith's own sexual ambitions is what brought about that on him. Now, that's left out of all the Mormon stories that you hear. You have to dig real deep into the Johnson family to find out the truth. But once again, the church takes that story, and which is a really depraved, disgusting effort that Joseph Smith was pursuing this 12 to 14-year-old girl sexually, that he may have been caught doing something with her, and that led to the tar and feathering. They totally changed the narrative that he was just trying to do something righteous. These men came upon him, tried to tar and feather him because he was trying to do God's will. And then that narrative is what's been, spread for the last 200 years. And similarly, Tim is taking similar approaches to his own history. He's completely changing the narrative that these, 6 women that have come forth with alleged sexual assaults, including forcible rape. He's changing that narrative to something that's completely not true, and using that as proof that he's on God's errand, because these are attacks from Satan, and this is proof. And so those LDS people that believed he was this righteous crusader will pick up on his narrative of the story and will become even more hardened in their belief. Oh, this persecution is proof that he's on God's errand, and become even hardened in their belief that he is this righteous crusader, a prophet of God, a chosen man of the last days that is doing all these good. So there's a huge divide between people like me that know him personally, like dozens and dozens of us that know that this guy is a complete fraud. He's a sexual deviant, that he's in it all for self-aggrandizement, power, money, ambition, and he's a disgusting person. And then his followers that pick up on his narrative and believe that he's a prophetic, righteous crusader, one of the best men that have ever lived, one of the best Americans. And that's a really polarizing, very wide gap of opinions on this guy, just as there was in Joseph Smith's day.
Yeah, I mean, that's true.
Yeah, I hate that it all comes down to like a sex thing, like the couple's ruse.
Yeah, it really does suck quite a bit.
Yeah.
Was a couple's ruse like a vehicle to achieve some good outcomes and saving kids? That's the same thing as polygamy. Like, was polygamy like instituted just to gratify some horny old men and get them access to younger women, or was it a righteous endeavor trying to build up the kingdom of God? You can spin the story either way, and people land on both sides of those debates.
Yeah. God. Do you have any idea when Tim's alleged drug use kind of came into the picture? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah. On our tours, there's times where he acted really weird. And at the time I'm fully 100% Mormon, never done any drugs or alcohol. And so I didn't know what to look for. Looking back on it, I'm like, oh, dude, that guy was totally pounding Adderall like candy, because I know a little bit more about drugs now. And he would he'd do all sorts of weird things. And we were in New York one time on a tour, and he like bangs on my door at midnight. He's like, we got to go out on the town. We got to go out on the city. Let's go. And he dragged me out, and we go running around Manhattan till like 3 a.m. He was clearly on some sort of upper that was really driving him hard that night.
What did you guys do? Where did you go?
Yeah.
Nothing. We ran. We seriously like jogged around Manhattan, the financial district, which was dead. He was like, there's got to be some nightlife around here somewhere. And there wasn't. It was a financial district in Manhattan.
Yeah, that gets real dead at night.
Yeah, we went all the way down to Battery Park and hit a dead end and couldn't go in, so we walked back home.
Wow.
Weird guy.
It's like a 3-hour excursion. I'm like, what are we doing out here? What are we looking for? Anyways, yeah, I think he was on something then. And that was probably 2014 or so, 2013.
So he had already gotten his second blessing.
No, second anointing was it later, right?
Was it later?
That was after 2014.
No, it was earlier.
Allegedly. Was it?
Yeah, it was earlier. Yeah, if the blessing that he told me about, it was that second anointing, I believe it was. I think that was probably around 2013.
Wow. I placed it so much later. So he's had that mentality allegedly for 10 years at this point. Mm-hmm. That's kind of dark because of how much he's done. And is he doing that because part of him has been feeling justified in that he's doing a righteous thing, or like maybe part of his mind is like trying to tell him that he is doing the right thing, and so he can do it because he's got this. I just wonder, there's no way you can know, but I just wonder how his mind feels about these things.
Well, I can tell you exactly what he told me after he had that special blessing. He was struggling with his work. He said at the time, working for the government, DHS or HSI, that he had to look at a lot of child porn, and it was really disturbing to him, and it like dragged him down. So he would go to the temple sometimes twice a week to try, because he felt so guilty about these sexual things that he had to be involved in. And then he went to Elder Ballard and got this special blessing that absolved him from guilt. And what he told me that Elder Ballard told him was that as long as he was doing these sexual things, this depravity in the pursuit of saving kids, then he would not be held accountable by the church or God for those sins. And so I totally saw a visible change in his demeanor from that moment on. He felt no longer burdened by the things he was seeing do. I was interpreting it as because he had to view child porn. I don't know if that's true. He's burdened by something of a sexual nature at that time that was resolved by Elder Ballard. And that was before OUR actually got off the ground.
Wow, this is a long game for him, I guess.
Yeah.
That
I think he's still in that mentality today, that he can't do any wrong. That as long as he's pursuing saving kids, he could go sleep with hookers, he could sexually assault women, he could, as long as it's pursuing kids, that's the higher calling, and the messy path to get there is sanctioned by God because it was sanctioned by Elder Ballard.
Even if he's not really helping any kids, I guess.
So he must feel like a modern king, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There we go.
So speaking on the modern king himself, I know that he had went to the Spear Fund sort of as he made his exit from OUR in 2023. It looks like every time I check in on the Spear Fund website, it seems to be completely inactive as of the end of 2023. So it doesn't seem like they're doing anything. Do you have a sense of what Tim is doing currently? Because the lawsuits are still coming in for him, right? Mm-hmm. What is he doing right now?
Well, he is desperately trying to continue to build the narrative that he's saving kids. And so if you just need to follow his social media to see what he wants people to perceive him as. So he's posting recently, like a picture of him with some government official in Mexico saying, just had a great talk with government official of Suarez, Mexico or something. And about saving kids. We're coming after the bad guys. some generic, non-specific, no details sort of post to make it look like he's actually doing some work. And I know he's partnering with a company called Aerial Recovery right now. And he's also doing a lot of fundraisers by speaking at evangelical churches and other people that have seen the Sound of Freedom movie. So he's still raising a lot of money. And I don't think he has any interest in saving kids other than getting the PR benefit of being in that position so that he can turn it around and raise money. OUR raised tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars probably total on that story, on that narrative. And now that Sound of Freedom is out, he's even more well known. And so there's a fundraising effort that's still going on. He's still meeting with churches. I heard he was baptized in some evangelical church recently. And so he's just continuing to try and outpace the negative press, the negative narrative with the Sound of Freedom character that he wants to be perceived as.
Wow. How much is a speaking fee? I wonder, like 50,000?
I don't think he gets paid for that, but it turns into a fundraiser.
Tithing.
Tithing.
You open the baskets up.
And he doesn't have to pay taxes on that, I bet.
No, probably not. I mean, who knows? So actually that can kind of lead us into the many lawsuits that are playing out right now, including the horrific sexual assault accusations. Those are, I know there's been a couple things that have been dismissed, and he's really leaning into that because, again, he can kind of make it sound like these women's lies are all falling one by one, when in reality, it's just, there's a couple things that have been dropped, but they're still actively in the process of going through the court systems, right? Like a lot of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, nothing that is important or major has been dismissed.
Yeah.
Like there was one case where a lawsuit was filed against Tim, OUR, and Catherine Ballard for her participation in these allegations. And the judge found that Catherine Ballard was not a party or part of this, and or that she be dropped from the lawsuit. So Tim immediately goes on and then part of that is also the judge's ruling was that when the lawsuit concludes, if he's found not guilty, or if then Catherine's legal fees for getting her dropped will be paid by the plaintiffs or those bringing the lawsuit. So the shred of truth is that Catherine was dropped from a lawsuit, and legal fees for her having to get dropped the lawsuit will be paid once it's concluded by the opposing team. So Tim then takes that little shred of truth, goes on social media and says, the case was just totally dismissed. The judge just totally dropped the lawsuit and ordered the other side to pay us for our legal fees. But the allegations in that lawsuit is still moving forward against him and OUR. So it's like, it's a flat out lie.
Could he be countersued for lying?
I mean, he's being sued so many times.
So many times. Yeah, it'd be an impossible job. Almost everything that comes out of his mouth is either a partial truth or a flat out lie. So, I mean.
It's like what he's been saying about the woman he pretty much got imprisoned when you bravely went down to Colombia to give like a character witness thing, and kind of parading it around like, we got one, guys. Look, here's me helping save kids, and here's me I'm just getting these monsters off the street. In reality, he put this impoverished woman, who was struggling and went to this party and engaged in sex, not with kids or anything, and he put her in jail. A woman who probably needed help. And instead of him feeling, I guess, any sense of remorse or shame for that, he's just trying to make it look like he did some OUR rescue thing. It's so infuriating. I think it's so awesome you went down there, because I would have been terrified to do that, to go to another country, to be dealing with those people.
Yeah, I was really nervous about doing that and going down there because when you have people like Tom Harrison advising Tim and all of these doomsday beliefs in Tim's mind, and Tom Harrison totally in his books and theology justifies murdering people if they're evil or if they're working for Satan or whatever that means. And when you have those kind of fringe beliefs in your head, those kind of people are capable of doing anything, as we saw in the case of Chad and Lori Daybell. They're able to justify killing Lori's kids because of these religious beliefs, the same religious beliefs that Tim holds. So I figured if Tim was going to take me out, Colombia would be the best place to do that. I could just be a standard sidewalk mugging gone wrong, or I could be crossing the street and get ran over. So I was really nervous and on edge going down there at that time. But I wanted to just talk to Kelly in person, and I had sensed at that time that she was entrapped by him, and I was the only witness in her defense, even though I had no part and didn't know anything about the circumstances that she was arrested under. I did know, having talked to many OUR operatives that were on the Cartagena raid, including the filmmakers that filmed it and things like that, that is a clear case of entrapment, of taking innocent people and turning them into traffickers by just getting them to say they would accept money for attending a party. That's all that, that you just do that, and then it's technically pimping or it's technically trafficking. And to get to your point, though, about creating a narrative, in that case with Kelly, she was convicted of pimping, of being involved in a financial exchange for sex with some, but she was exonerated of trafficking. She was found, they dropped the trafficking charges because no kids were involved, no kids under the age of consent were involved, and nobody was trafficked to that raid. And that raid is what was featured in the Sound of Freedom movie. Kelly was a main villain in the Sound of Freedom movie. But once that conviction of pimping was issued on Kelly Suarez, Tim the next day goes on social media saying Kelly Suarez, convicted child pedophile, is going to jail.
It's horrible.
He takes something she was convicted of pimping and that's a complete lie. And so there still is a case for Kelly. I hope she gets a day in court with Tim, because he has ruined her life. Absolutely ruined her life, and still is out there saying that she's a convicted child predator when she is not. She is not. And but that's the kind of thing that he has to do, because the Sound of Freedom movie was made on that narrative that he is going out, capturing the bad guys like Kelly Suarez and putting them in prison. And then come to find out, after the movie is released, Kelly Suarez is not in prison because she wasn't a trafficker and didn't have anything to do with children. He's got to fix that. So he went to Colombia and got charges brought against her. They couldn't get trafficking charges pinned against her, but they got pimping charges brought against her to try and maintain his narrative of the whole Sound of Freedom movie, which is absolute fiction. It's bullshit fiction that's been sold on a national level.
It is so soulless. Like I just
I don't like this.
Whoa,
person.
hot take. That is sincerely. I mean, I get so heated, like doing research on him, because even his origin story is verifiably not true 90% of it. And he continues to expand on it and make more and more claims about this, including kind of advocating for, the border wall and stuff with a fake story, a story that didn't have anything to do with the border wall. And it's just so maddening. I feel like, because you were saying, look at his social media, I do occasionally, but I feel kind of crazy when I look at it because of the sort of rabid support he's getting. And I don't know how to process the feelings I'm feeling, because how do you combat that? How do you combat that level of like fervent, sort of like, I don't know, maniacal support for somebody who's just doing horrible things?
Was he always like this? Like as a child? I mean, you didn't know him as a child, but like, what was his home life like? Like, how did his mom talk to him?
Yeah, right.
I do know about that. I had the unfortunate experience of having his mom and many other family members on one of our tours. And his mom is a piece of work, let me tell you that. She's there. He comes from a very wealthy family.
I'm not
in
shocked by
California.
that. Yeah.
And his mom has a sense of entitlement that goes along with wealth and money that is pretty disgusting. And that manifests itself on the tour where she wouldn't be happy with the restaurant choices that I picked as the tour operator. And so she would go up to the front to the driver of the bus and just completely commandeer the tour and say, "We're not going to go there for lunch. Here's where I want to go. I want to go to this restaurant for lunch." There's 50 people on this bus, a handful of them are Tim's family, and they want all of us to accommodate their wishes. And so she's that kind of person that would completely commandeer the bus. And the bus driver was like, "I'm sorry, lady, I don't work for you." And then she'd be upset. And then she'd sit in the seat behind me and talk shit about me for 7 days. So she's that kind of person. And constantly rolling her eyes, constantly scoffing. Nobody's ever good enough. And so I can't imagine that not having an effect on Tim.
Yeah, that clocks.
Yeah.
That makes sense based on the little I know of Tim Ballard. Yeah. Do you have any idea if his family was full LDS bloodline, or were they converts?
Yeah. As far as I know, they were. Tim said that his ancestry goes back and connects into Elder Ballard's ancestry somewhere way back. So I think they're one of the pioneer families. And, long-standing original pioneer families are revered and you have access to social circles that the rest of the converts or the rest of us don't have. By all indications, he's one of those families.
Yeah, I know we're a little over an hour at this point, so I don't want to keep you here too long. I could ask you.
You're good. We got a lot to cover. These are great questions. It's fun talking to somebody, as you guys know so much about this. Usually I get to just talk about the surface level of what's happening with the allegations, but man, you're going deep and you're asking the right questions. So whatever you need.
Oh, thank
I'm happy
you.
to oblige.
Really, really appreciate it. Well, let me just ask then very briefly. I know we can't go too deep into the government side of stuff because it could just be like 4 hours, but do you know how connected Reyes and Ballard are? Do you think that there is allegedly stuff that Reyes has done that is criminal?
That is a really good question. Pretty much everybody that went on operations and was involved in TIN for an extended period of time got wrapped up in doing something criminal. And that is, that's kind of tried and true, the sad reality of it, where he would cross the line of ethical behavior, moral behavior, and legal behavior, which is one reason why he primarily operated in third world countries, because it's a lot easier to get away with a lot of stuff in third world countries. But a lot of the people that I know personally that were involved in the operations were dragged in or led into situations in which they did something seriously wrong and they regret it. And Tim now has dirt on them. And he has used that to threaten and intimidate witnesses. Even something as simple as, well, that event that you held, that personal event, well, that was paid for OUR funds. So if you out me, then I'm going to out you for fraud, financial fraud as well, and you're going down with me. He's told things like that to people that I know personally. So when it comes to Sean Reyes was involved in several operations. He was involved in a lot of things, and what I have heard and been told that I can't verify is true, all I can say is rumors at this point, is that he was involved in things with hookers and drugs and some of these parties that Tim would set up. And knowing how Tim operates, that he tries to get dirt on everybody that he works with so he can use that as leverage to control them, there's no question in my mind that he would use every opportunity like that to try and leverage and control Sean Reyes as well. And recently, just a few months ago, an audit was done on the Attorney General's office of Sean Reyes by the state of Utah, an independent investigative team. And their audit report found that Sean Reyes was compromised, that his office was doing the bidding and work for OUR. It was also personally funneling money to OUR, and that Sean had created these sub charities that then would decide which charity got money, and then he would funnel that to OUR. And so Sean was sending a lot of money to OUR. He was giving OUR legal immunity. There are people that have claimed that he was intimidating witnesses and trying to cover up alleged crimes that Tim and OUR were involved in, as well as rumors about drugs and hookers and scandalous parties that may or may not have been videotaped. That I think will all come out when Troy Rawlings finishes his investigation, or the FBI finishes their investigation, and some of these things go to court. Those are all just allegations at this point. I can't say that they're true or not. But every indication, including this audit report by the state of Utah, shows that Sean Reyes is completely compromised. And the only way to compromise somebody and get them to do illegal things is if you got dirt on them.
And that investigation is still ongoing right now?
Yeah, my understanding is that it's ongoing, that there's multiple investigations that are ongoing, and there's multiple investigators that are still conducting interviews and reaching out and gathering information on a state, local, and federal level. In addition to an international level, I guess Argentina just 2 weeks ago, I think, issued arrest warrant charging Tim with fraud and espionage, the government of Argentina.
Oh, wow. I didn't hear that at all.
Yeah, it was just posted on Alan Mortenson's social media page. He's one of the lawyers representing the women victims of Tim Ballard in the sexual assault lawsuits. So yeah, there's the government of Argentina is accusing Tim of fraud and espionage.
Damn.
In their country.
And
so
that's a series of different investigations going on. So there is still a decent chance that Sean Reyes will face criminal, legal consequences for some of this, then, is what you're saying? Or there's a potential for it? There's
a potential for sure. However, I went to the committee meeting when they presented the audit report to the new Attorney General and the oversight committee, the Utah Oversight Committee. And while their findings were completely damning and showing that Sean Reyes was unethically, immorally compromised his person and his office, and used the office of Attorney General to do unethical, immoral, and illegal things, they chose not to hold him accountable for anything at that time. The complete spineless lack of accountability. It's like, what the hell do you want this audit report for if you're not going to do anything about it? Yeah. And so I'm hoping that the new Attorney General, Derek Brown, will take that seriously and try and clean up things and hold Sean Reyes accountable. However, I mean, Utah politics is very tight-knit.
So there's all of that going on. And then you and your co-host, Kara Burrell, had just released something maybe a month ago at this point, that there's another series of lawsuits, right, that are financially based with entirely different people, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, an entirely different group of people that worked with OUR and Tim out of California have issued their own lawsuit against him and OUR, alleging fraud and financial misuse of funds and things along those lines. Completely separate group. I don't know them. Nobody, the women that are accusing Tim of sexual assault in Utah, don't know them. We all found out about this lawsuit when it went public not too long ago.
So hopefully somebody gets him. Sounds like a lot of people are out after him.
Well, yeah.
He took in millions and millions of dollars from very well-intended donors that wanted to do something good. And now the more that we peel back the curtain behind the wizard, we're seeing that it was all misused for all sorts of things other than it wasn't going to kids. And a good example of that is there's an orphanage in Haiti called Foyer des Sions, which was an OUR ran orphanage. And they were the subject of dozens of fundraisers. Millions of dollars were raised on their behalf. And there's people coming out of the woodwork that are saying none of that money went to the kids. The kids that are down there are actually were being sexually assaulted under OUR's care and watch and on a nightly basis. And some were becoming pregnant and having to go through forced abortions. And this is all on Tim's and OUR's watch. And so it's just disgusting to think that you're donating money to help kids when in fact you're donating money to people that are actually trafficking kids and providing places for them to be sexually abused in orphanage that they're running, And so, yeah, I think there is dozens and dozens of groups, hundreds and thousands of individuals that all have claims that could be made here if they know the truth.
So
wow,
so dark. Is that that orphanage? Is that in relation to is this different from the whole Marty situation?
No, that is
them.
That's the same one. Yeah, the orphanage ran by Giesno with the whole Marty story. Yeah, there's reports coming out of that orphanage of child sexual abuse and forced abortions that under OUR's care and watch, and that's pretty disturbing stuff.
I have a very outsider's opinion on the idea of even somebody, and I don't mean this as an offense towards the LDS Church, but people who are raised inside of a sexual purity culture, especially with the terms like sex addiction, I don't know that they can be equipped enough to handle something as complicated as child trafficking and even consensual sex work, because I think it can become it's very nuanced. It's a nuanced topic that somebody who is a black and white thinker probably wouldn't be best equipped for. That's just my own opinion, but.
Yeah, no, that's a really good observation. And I could tell you a story that highlights your point exactly. One of the OUR operators that I'm friends with, that I know personally, and a good Mormon LDS guy that's never been involved in any sort of sex work or human trafficking, volunteered, went on an operation. His job was to walk the beaches, pretend to be a tourist in one of these third world countries, looking for access to kids. And so he would do that. And after a couple of days of talking to dozens or hundreds of people, he came to the conclusion that most people's response was, no, why would you want to do that? That's horrible. Get out of here. He could not find that there was a market there at all. And then he started having a little bit of success by finding this kid, who's maybe 18 or something. And he's like, hey, he's giving them the pitch, I'll give you lots of money if you can find us some kids that we can have a party with. And do things to. And this kid was like, all right, I'll meet you here. Meet me here in an hour. And so they did. And the kid brought a girl with him. And he's like, here's somebody, how much would you pay for her? And he figured out, fortunately in that situation, that this kid, he's like, is this your girlfriend or something? And he's like, well, yeah. It's like, what are you doing? And he's like, well, we just need some money. And so we talked about it, and she agreed to, have sex with you if you gave us so many pesos or whatever. And he felt really disgusting and dirty in that moment, and realized that he wasn't helping the problem, that he was actually creating a market out of that. Now this, another OUR operator that I talked to told me a story about, doing the same thing, being a sex tourist, going around searching for people willing to give access to kids. And he found a woman that said that she would. She ended up bringing one of her own children to them, and then she was arrested for trafficking. And what he came to understand happened was she was an impoverished mother caring for many kids that she could not feed.
Yeah.
And she was placed in this position where, well, if I let somebody do something to one of my kids for a night, that could be enough money to feed us for possibly months. And so she made the horrible decision that it was best in her situation for that to happen. And she ended up going to jail for it.
But she wasn't out there offering her children.
No.
She wasn't she wasn't a trafficker in that instance. Yes, she was, because she's in a desperate situation. And this guy who told me that story was sobbing. He said he was messed up. He took like 6 or 7 years of therapy for him to work through his role in putting that woman in jail. And what happened to her kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. So these are the kind of nuances that we don't understand about sex work, that are very, very complicated. And it's not black and white. But these aren't the stories that Tim's telling you. He's telling you the stories about these awful child predators that he's putting in jail. Right. He's not telling the stories about the mother that offered her kid up to try and provide food for the rest of her family, or the teenager that offered his girlfriend up and making a stupid decision in the heat of the moment. Those aren't the stories that he's telling you about. Those aren't the stories that they're making a Sound of Freedom movie about.
Yeah. Exactly. Because it doesn't create that Hollywood narrative for sure, because so much of sex work and human trafficking in general is based on systemic issues and, corrupt governments and things that can't just be solved by like white American guys coming in and being like, I'll save you. But that's not as, it's not as clean. It's like very complex. And so, totally.
And one reason, like Colombia, also another layer of complexity and nuance that's added onto this is we come into this from our American perspective, and American culture comes from this purity standpoint where our origins and our founders is in the Puritan movement, this purity mindset regarding chastity and sex. And that's not the case in other places. For example, in Colombia, the age of consent for sexual relations is 14. In the United States, it's 18. A 19-year-old can't have sex with a 17-year-old or you're going to jail for pedophilia. In Colombia, their culture is different. Their mentality and their view of sex is a little bit different, and their age of consent is 14. So you can prostitute yourself legally at the age of 14, and there's no laws against that.
Right or wrong, it's their laws.
Right or wrong. Yeah. Right. And so we're trying to impose our American Puritan origin viewpoints on a situation that is completely different, of a mentality and a people that have a different view on sex and chastity and morality and sex work and things like that. And so these Americans like Tim and others going in there thinking they're this righteous crusader, they're going into a different situation and then presenting the story into something that's not.
And causing a lot of damage in the meantime.
Yeah, real people are being hurt in the process.
Yeah.
Seriously, lives are being destroyed.
Is there something that we can do as outsiders to support the victims who are, awaiting justice at this point? I know that they have the women have come forward very bravely, shown their faces and spoken out, which is really hard. And I can't imagine the kind of backlash that's given them in their lives. But is there anything we can do to support them? The easiest thing is they are fighting against a person that has a massive following. And that massive following has been mobilized to raise funds for his legal defense. And so it really is a David Goliath situation. The women that have come forward do not have multi-million-dollar hedge funds that's backing their legal defense. They don't have these very wealthy donors, and they don't have the following that he does. So dismantling that is a big priority.
And we can do that by sharing these kind of messages, your podcast and others, getting the truth out there so that he is restricted in some way from raising additional money.
Yeah.
Now, the trend has been moving that way. His, especially because of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints denouncing him, he lost a lot of fundraisers. He tried to hold a fundraiser locally with his local stake, which was by support of his stake president. But from what I've heard, it didn't go well. He's trying to raise money wherever he can speak. So the more people that know who he really is and what this money is going to, it's going to fight against women that were sexually assaulted by Tim.
Yeah.
Damn.
That's what the Legal Defense Fund is going towards. It's going to fight and discredit and issue further frivolous lawsuits against these women. He's trying to bury them in legal paperwork and lawsuits and countersuits, and their lives have been completely upended and destroyed. So sharing the message of who Tim Ballard really is, what OUR really is up to, is a huge thing. Obviously, if you have means to legal, there really should be a team of 100 lawyers working on this. There are so many crimes, unethical, immoral things that have been perpetuated on people in dozens of countries around the world. And the victims, the trail of victims that he has left in the wake of the carnage that he's left behind, probably amass in the hundreds at least. And so the women that have come forward bravely, the first women, the pioneers that have come forward accusing them, are sadly, I believe, the tip of the iceberg of other women and children and men that have been victimized by his couples ruse, by his entrapment schemes, these parties and these entrapment scenarios that he set up in other countries. So those people deserve to be represented and heard. And I don't know how to reach them, but getting the word out helps to know that those victims aren't alone. The lawyers that are representing the women are grateful for any assistance of any kind, either professional, financial, or legal, that come forward. I know their lives have been completely taken over by this whole case and this whole saga, because it's absolutely massive. And Tim's had a team of, at one point, I believe it was 30 lawyers on his side, trying to dismantle their claims and personally attack the lawyers, personally attack anybody who's involved in it. So there's a whole bunch of things that I think people can do to help support the victims, help get the truth out there.
Is there a central place where they're collecting funds?
Not that I know of currently, but I think the lawyers that are representing the women are Alan Mortensen and Suzette Rasmussen. I think I know Alan is active on social media. And so if you find him, he can give you updates. I know at one point we were collecting money for Kelly Suarez's defense. She didn't have any money. She's just an impoverished girl in Colombia. Yeah. But that sadly case is closed. So there's nowhere that I'm aware of right now, but if you follow them, if you follow things, then if that arises, then I'm sure it'll be announced.
That was so informative, so helpful. Thank you for speaking with us. Thank you for speaking out. Is there places that you would like people to find you?
Well, we're trying to cover the current events on Kara Burrell YouTube channel. And I'm on Twitter, not very active on X or Instagram.
You and Kara are mostly working on her channel, right?
Yeah. Well, anytime something is announced or a new turn of events, we'll do podcasts on it on Kara's channel and try and keep people updated. It's going to go on for years and years. And so I'm trying to take care of my mental health, because you get in this dark space for too long. It's pretty depressing and hard, but we're in it for the long haul and to make sure that justice is served here in this situation and that the victims have a voice. that's what's most important, and feel supported.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for doing that. I very much feel very passionate about this too. So we'll definitely keep talking about it.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't the last time we talk. There's a continually evolving scenario.
Please.
And so I really appreciate your deep dive into it and understanding what this is all about. It's like one of the craziest stories that had I not lived it, I almost wouldn't believe it was true.
It's mind-blowing, truly. Yeah. It is just really astounding.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Talk to you soon, okay? Please keep in touch.
Okay, will do. Thanks.
All right.